Well, Tony Gosling, of course, your reaction, if you agree with Sean O'Grady there, and maybe I should also ask you if you do think, just to get an idea of your stance, that Boris Johnson does indeed want to go ahead with a no-deal Brexit, and whether you think that, if not, then elections is something he also desires.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's basically saying, isn't he, that he wants, if he doesn't get the confidence of Parliament tonight, which looks likely, he wants to go for the election. But this is the staggering reality today, is that the Labour Party has now backtracked. It's been calling for the last 2 years for a general election. Every time they get on the television, we want a general election. Now Boris is offering them one. They're now retreating. They're now saying, oh, well, actually, no, we don't really want a general election. We want to have it on our terms, Emily Thornberry said on the TV here tonight, the Shadow Foreign Secretary. She is really laughable with the comments like that. The idea that the opposition is going to dictate the terms on which a general election is going to take place. What this shows me is that they are afraid of a general election because they believe that the referendum result in 2016 would be reflected in that general election, and quite possibly Boris would romp home with an increased majority and they'd be left with egg on their face. So there's a lot of, I think, shammery going on here, fake outrage. You know, there's a whole political class in London that have been growing up over the last 30 or 40 years. They're kind of corporate donation dependent. They're looking for jobs in industry when they leave Parliament, and they can see this globalist corporate donations flying out of the window if Brexit happens. So, you know, I think there's a wide gap actually between what our political class in Britain thinks and what the people think, and we've seen that with the referendum. And Brexit will lance that boil, and I think a lot of those people will be out of work, out of their jobs, because the whole political landscape would change if we were to leave the EU with or without a deal. And of course, you know, this is one of the things that it seems obvious, but the delay tactic has been going on and on and on. The decision was made to leave, with or without a deal, in 2016. And all of the, particularly the Conservative Party leadership under Theresa May, and the whole of Parliament pretty much ever since, or, you know, a sizable majority, it seems, if this vote goes through tonight, has been trying to delay it and delay it and delay it. Of course, this is just a tactic. And by Labour now saying today that they don't want a general election, it shows that they're running scared, in fact, of the people's view. And actually, you know, we need to decide, are the people sovereign? Is the referendum result ever going to be recognised and implemented by the government? Boris is doing his best, and I think the other thing is he may, even if this vote goes through, he may have some other tactics up his sleeve in order to make sure that we do leave, Britain does leave on the 29th of October by whatever means, because he's actually his whole credibility rests on this. And I've seen certainly the people being interviewed today. I've been watching quite closely. Both sides actually looking a little bit unconfident. So we may even see this general election on Monday, October the 14th. But if not, there may be an extension. And that is exactly, of course, what the Remainers want, even though, of course, both parties said that they would implement the decision of the people. We're seeing now political class is in a world of its own, and it thinks it is in charge, not the people.
Well, let's see here. I'm looking at Sean O'Grady, what Jeremy Corbyn just said Saturday in Salford. He said, quote, "I will be delighted when the election comes. I'm ready for it. You're ready for it. We're ready for it. We'll take the message out there, and above all, we will win for the people of this country." Kind of goes against what Tony Gosling there said. Do you think that Labour wants an election, Jeremy Corbyn wants an election, and how that might fare? And in terms of Boris Johnson, I might add, if you can also give us a reaction there, how he may have taken some hits with the way that he suspended Parliament, with the way that he associated himself with Trump, and perhaps any other moves that perhaps has hit a little bit with his image in terms of his popularity with masses.
Well, look, the Labour Party is not a corporatist party. It's not a party that's run by big business. Jeremy Corbyn is the most left-wing leader of the Labour Party for 35 years, if not 50 or 60 years or longer. Who knows? He's very left-wing indeed. He's not anything to do with corporate interests. He would be shamed if anyone thought he was. It's an extraordinary allegation to make against him. The Labour Party has been all over the place about whether it wants a general election or not. it's usually saying that they want one. The last time we had this in 2017 with Boris Johnson's predecessor, Theresa May, the Labour Party was rather behind in the polls. They said, OK, well, let's have an election. And they did rather well, almost beat Mrs May, and certainly got rid of her majority, and leading to the hung parliament we've had ever since. I think that the issue about what the Labour Party wants is, I think that for their people, for working people in Britain, Brexit would be a pretty bad result. Many of them did vote for it, but it's certainly also true that it would be very bad for them. For the very wealthy in Britain, I have to say, the people who have assets abroad, for example, and foreign currency holdings and all these sort of things, the hedge fund people, all this sort of stuff, these people will not suffer so badly from Brexit. It's people who work in manufacturing industry, for example, who have to export, farming, people in farming, especially poor paid farming occupations. These are the sort of people who are going to get hit quite hard by Brexit, and also a lot of European citizens who live and work in Britain in the public services, nurses, for example. Not rich people, not corporate interests. And also, if we leave the EU, what Boris Johnson and his friends want is a much closer relationship with the United States of America, and of course that's the great symbol of corporate interest, rightly or wrongly, in many people's views. So it's a very complicated sort of picture, and I think that we will have to find a way out of it. And I think that, yes, the people did speak in 2016 by a very narrow majority. But they also said that they wanted to leave the European Union. But they did not say under what circumstances. They did not say with a no-deal Brexit or with a deal Brexit, or with any other kind of Brexit. It wasn't very clear what they were saying. It wasn't. People didn't really have a very clear idea. And in truth, a lot of people did want to just leave without a deal and all that. A lot of people are saying now Boris Johnson's threatening. But a lot of people didn't. A lot of people wanted to have a close relationship, maybe be part of the customs union, the single market, the sort of relation that Switzerland or Norway has with the European Union, for example, or Turkey for that matter, which is a partial economic relationship, trading relationship, but a relatively close one. There's a whole range of possibilities there. Not one of them, not a single one of them was agreed at the time. Still isn't. Britain was divided in 2016. Britain is still divided today. Parliament's divided today, which reflects it. And we need to have another public vote, another referendum, and a binding one for that matter. And I think that if we did have that, and people said no deal Brexit, well, I think everyone would have to agree with that. And if they said we must remain in the European Union, people would have to try and agree with that. No, they got freedom to carry on campaigning in their own way. But I think that that would be really the only way of solving this impasse and all these divisions and arguments between people, which are getting very sort of het up and very personalised a lot.
Tony Gosling, you have some reactions to Sean Stone. Go ahead.
Well, look, I mean, if you want to leave your political party, you don't need to go do a deal with your party leader in order to do it. You just walk out the door, and that's obviously got to be on the table. We've been waiting long enough for this, and people in Britain are getting really fed up with the political class's attempt to just kick the can down the road constantly. We can always do deals with the EU after we leave. We don't need a deal. We certainly don't need to hand over nearly £40 billion to the EU for the pleasure of walking out their door. This is really what we're seeing today is Theresa May's
money. Theresa May's the money
bomb exploding in slow motion. And we're seeing also many of the people that, like Philip Hammond, who were put in positions of power by hers as Chancellor, they are the ones who are trying desperately to keep us in the EU. There was even a leak today, which Sean might have seen, where Philip Hammond was quoting in a private meeting the words of EU legal advisors. So clearly people like him are in touch very much with the EU and on the EU side of the debate, which they weren't supposed to be. They were supposed to be in charge of the country and trying to make us leave, but they're very close to the legal people. Also, look, let's also have a look at how we got into the EU in the first place. There is a secret Foreign and Commonwealth Office document, FCO 30/1048, which was kept secret for 30 years. And it said, oh, well, we're going to get everyone into the European Union and the common market. And after 30 years, it will be too late to change it. So the whole thing, even in the first place, was never really about just a trading compact. It was about a United States of Europe. People in Britain have never had a chance to vote on that, and neither has the House of Commons, actually, on a United States of Europe. And I think if everyone was...
We did have a vote. We had two national referendums.
They would say no to a political union.
Two referendums.
That's what they've said with the euro as well. Many of the countries that were bamboozled into that now want to leave.
No.
Sean O'Grady, go ahead.
Well, hopeless. I mean, Philip Hammond was Chancellor of the Exchequer in Theresa May's government. He's bound to know what the legal advice was on both sides. He's bound to have talked to all the experts. He was the finance minister, for heaven's sake, in the first place. In the second place, he voted three times to leave the European Union under the deal. We did have a deal that was negotiated by Theresa May and the European Union, which was all agreed by the two governments, so to speak, European Union and the UK government, but which the House of Commons and Parliament refused to accept, which is why one of the reasons we're in the mess we are in now. And as for this 30-year conspiracy, it's nonsense. It was an election issue in many elections, including the 1970 election. It was a referendum on continuing membership of the European Union or Common Market, as it was then, that we had in 1975, and of course we had the referendum in 2016, and lots of arguments and debates in Parliament and in the country otherwise. So it's a nonsense to say it was a conspiracy about people. A lot of people in the country today are quite sincerely pro-European. They want to have relationships that are economic, social, cultural and political with the European Union. They want us to have a closer relationship with our closest trading partners.
Well, that's
people
fine having
we
a
have
close
so much in common with,
relationship,
people we share a civilization with. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. And that is what we are
Okay, we're both talking at the same time. Hold on.
A 30-year conspiracy is an absolute nonsense.
Okay,
Sean,
Tony Gosling, in less than a minute, your response. 1 minute. Go ahead.
Sean, do you want a United States of Europe or not? I mean, the people have not been asked this, but this is what's being imposed, including a military union. And one little bird told me, this is one of the things I think is potentially the real reason why we're leaving.
There's no military aspect, hardly a military aspect to it.
To get involved in a military union, because they do not want British troops to be sent into a battle commanded by French or German.
We want to stand up to Russia. We want to stand up to Russia. That is perfectly true.
But do you want a military union and a political union?
We don't need that. We have NATO. NATO does it extremely well for us, and it's right that we should have military cooperation throughout the EU. But some EU states are neutral. Don't forget that.
Well, yes, but this military union, which is now what they're bringing in, would mean that British troops would be commanded by French or German generals.
They're not bringing in a military union.
They are. Yes, they most certainly are. They're starting to bring this in. The British are now no part of that, but other countries are starting to come together in a military union.
If they are, fine. It's okay. We need to protect ourselves against all sorts of threats, including from Russia.
With NATO.
That's very important.
We don't need a military union in the EU. We can do it with NATO, can't we?
All right, let's end it there. Thank you.
Well, we can, except if Trump comes out of NATO, we have to do it ourselves in Europe.
Well, I don't think that's very likely.
Very well. We'll end it there. We're fresh out of time.
You've not been listening to him, have you?
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. Associate Editor of The Independent, Sean O'Grady. Thank you, investigative journalist Tony Gosling from Bristol. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of The Debate. From me, the entire team. It's goodbye until next time.